morning. State Health Minister John Cornwall is meeting this morning with health authorities. This follows the leaking of 2 letters written by the Children's Hospital's gastroenterologist, Dr David Moore. In the letters, Dr Moore expressed concern at the hospital's cross-infection rate and says at least 5 babies recently admitted to the hospital contracted other infections. A police search was mounted last night for 4 children and a woman missing in Morialta Conservation Park. However, a short time later, they were spotted walking out of the park by a patrol car. And detectives have arrested a Mile End couple over a spate of leather shop break-ins. The 29-year-old man and 25-year-old woman will appear in court on the 24th. Adelaide's weather, fine but cold. Now here's Sydney.
This is National 9 Morning News with John Gatfield.
Good morning. A 19-year-old man is appearing in court this morning over last night's horrific shooting spree in Melbourne. 6 people were killed and 18 wounded when a gunman fired indiscriminately at people in suburban Clifton Hill. 5 of the 6 have been identified. All are under 30 years of age.
The horror began just after 9:30 last night when the female passenger of a car travelling south along Hoddle Street, Clifton Hill, was shot dead and the male driver was wounded. Then, in a scene which most thought we could never see in Australia, the gunman moved up the road firing an automatic rifle as he went. Police believe up to 10 cars and a motorcycle were hit by the avalanche of shots fired from the high-powered rifle. The gunman continued to fire until 6 people lay dead and another 18 were wounded. The hail of bullets left bodies strewn along the road. Some of the wounded were crying out for help. The engine of one car was still running. Its driver slumped dead over the steering wheel.
It sounded like a machine gun, just bullets firing one after the other. I just went wild. And a friend of mine's shot, and we don't know what's happened. I just thank God that I didn't actually get out on Hoddle Street, because I think I would have been dead too.
By this stage, the gunman had left the scene, fleeing north along the nearby railway line to Queen's Parade. Police units moved in and sealed off more than a dozen blocks. They stopped a passenger train just before it reached the area. An automatic rifle and pump-action shotgun were found on the median strip in Hoddle Street, but the man was still armed with another automatic rifle. He opened fire on a police helicopter circling overhead. The chopper took a direct hit in a fuel line and had to make an emergency landing. As scores of police combed the area, the gunman was finally cornered after firing shots at a police van. But acting on reports, police still feared a second man was involved. It took almost 2 hours before the all-clear was given. Meanwhile, the 18 wounded had been rushed to nearby hospitals, one in a critical condition, several others seriously injured. Daylight gave a clearer picture of the carnage that had occurred on one of Melbourne's busiest thoroughfares. Debris was still scattered over a 200-metre section of the road and in nearby Fitzroy where the gunman had been captured. Trains were running, but Hoddle Street was still sealed off. A 19-year-old man has been taken to the scene by detectives to take part in a reenactment of last night's tragedy, one that has shocked senior police.
Well, it is certainly the greatest massacre of innocent people that has occurred in Melbourne in recollected history.
After the 19-year-old man had appeared in the Melbourne Magistrates Court this morning, police were granted a further 6-hour extension of questioning time and a psychiatric doctor was authorised to interview him. Some of those injured in the shooting spree were still undergoing treatment a short time ago. A 21-year-old woman remains critically ill in the Alfred Hospital, with at least 2 others in a serious condition. Many others with minor injuries have been treated and allowed to leave hospital. One of the victims is understood to be the mother of an 18-month-old baby. Police don't expect to release the names of the dead until tomorrow. Homicide Squad detectives are appealing to anyone who may have witnessed the shootings to come forward. Paul Jamieson, National 9 News.
A Sydney woman and her son are to go before a High Court judge on the island of Penang this afternoon, charged with smuggling enough heroin to earn them Malaysia's mandatory death sentence. Lorraine and Aaron Cohen have been behind bars in Penang prison since their arrest 2.5 years ago. Their lawyer is Kapil Singh, who was unsuccessful in preventing Australian drug smuggler Kevin Barlow being hanged with his travelling companion Brian Chambers. After visiting the prison yesterday, Aaron's father, Denny Cohen, and Kapil Singh spoke of the feelings of the 2 defendants.
No, nervous, but otherwise holding up quite well to the situation.
Where there's life, there's hope.
Iran warned today that the Persian Gulf would remain full of mines while America and the Soviet Union maintained a military presence in the vital waterway. But the threat has had little effect on the latest US convoy escorting Kuwaiti tankers through the Gulf.
So far, so good.
That's the apparent status of the U.S. convoy, which spent its second day steaming toward Kuwait. For much of the day today, the convoy traveled in single file, with one of the large, thick-hulled tankers apparently acting as a de facto minesweeper for the more thin-skinned warships. Also today, Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger said there is little doubt that mines recently found in Gulf waters were planted by Iran.
We have destroyed mines. We've announced that. We've destroyed mines outside of Kuwait Harbor, and they are mines that Iran possesses. We don't know if those specific mines were owned by Iran, but we have every reason to believe they were.
As Defense Secretary Weinberger was speaking, there were reports of yet more threats from the Iranians. This time, the words came from the Iranian ambassador to Lebanon. He addressed an audience in a Beirut mosque this weekend with these words.
We say that in the case of any foolish deed by the United States against us, we will transfer terrorism that is being practiced against us to the streets of Washington and the galleries of the White House.
As the Navy has pointed out, the threat of silkworm missiles, underwater mines, even suicide attack boats will still be out there for the next convoy and the next one after that. However, each journey is giving the Navy more experience and confidence to deal with conditions out here. According to knowledgeable sources, Arab Gulf states are also gaining more confidence that U.S. military escorts will not necessarily drag them into direct conflict with the Iranians.
Later in this bulletin, a special report on the background to the crisis in the Persian Gulf. After 2 weeks of uncertainty, the tall ships reenacting the First Fleet voyage are back on course. Having been saved from financial ruin by a public appeal, the fleet set sail from Rio de Janeiro and is now headed for Cape Town.
Crew members of the fleet were up bright and early in Rio this morning to prepare for the departure that nearly didn't happen. But after 2 weeks in port, the financial future of the voyage is now secure. A phone-in appeal by a Sydney radio station raised $762,000 of the $900,000 needed to keep the fleet afloat for the rest of the trip to Sydney. And the skipper of the flagship, the Bounty, says spirits are high for the rest of the grueling trek.
The morale on the fleet is incredibly high. Rio has been a beautiful stopover. It's been sunny every day. It's a lovely city, very friendly people, and everybody is just charged with energy and waiting to sail down to Cape Town now.
The local Navy band was dockside for the farewell. And for this crewman, Rio will be more memorable than just a squabble over funds. Reports from England that 2 of the ships failed to comply with safety standards for paying passengers have been denied by the organizers, and the fleet sailed out through Rio Harbor without any problems. The reenactment voyage is now at sea for the next 42 days. This next stretch is the roughest part of the trip. For $8,000, paying passengers will be going through the traditionally rough seas and high winds of a southern Atlantic crossing. Meanwhile, the ship's owners are happy. They've been promised the next installment of funds at Cape Town, and thanks to the many private and corporate donations, they look set to be paid on time. Bob Tarlow, National 9 News.
Still to come in National 9 Morning News, violence marks an anniversary in Northern Ireland in disappointment for Nigel Mansell in the Hungarian Grand Prix.